Hello, welcome back, everybody. So we're coming back after lunch on the East Coast. So I'm sure we're gonna have a few people trickle in over the next couple of minutes or so. I appreciate everybody coming back. If you are new to the Information Exchange virtual sessions, welcome in to Information Exchange 2026. If you are repeat, welcome back. Thank you for joining us again. This session is all about undeliverable as addressed mail, and we're going to get into some of the weeds here in a little bit. Just a quick setup logistic reminder. Everybody who's attending, your mics are muted, your camera is off. Please use our chat and our Q&A features. We are monitoring them throughout the whole session. And if the opportunity presents itself, we will kind of pause at an appropriate point midway through the session and answer those questions for you. We're joined with two of my favorite people on the planet, and I'll let them introduce themselves. Chris, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Brandon. And right back at you. You're one of my favorite people, too. Chris Lean, Executive Vice President of Coastal Affairs for BCC Software. You may have seen me on webinars in the past. You may even see me line dancing on stage in Nashville at the National Postal Forum. Wear a lot of different hats in the industry, but I love talking about address quality. And I'm super excited about that, and also super excited to be co-presenting with another one of my favorite people, Kendra Van Gundy. Kendra, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kendra Van Gundy. I'm the Director of Support. I've been in support for 21 years, I think it is. I swear I'm not that old. Some of you probably have talked to me about mail.dat and pre-sorting, but I am certainly loving address correction lately, and have been talking a lot with Chris and Brandon about undeliverable mail, and we see a lot of lists that come into support, and we talk to a lot of customers about addresses that don't get matched, or maybe why are they undeliverable? And so we want to talk about that today. So I'm excited to talk about this topic.
Thanks, Kendra. I got to give a special kudos to Kendra because I'm in charge of marketing here. We work really closely with our support and sales teams. And Kendra's always monitoring the user forum. We talked a little bit about that on the last session, as well as she's our champion for our customer portal development. So any changes and enhancements we're making to the portal, that is all being pioneered by our wonderful person, Kendra here. So please, if you have support questions or if you have questions about challenges you're running into, she's here with us today and she's paying attention. So I encourage everybody to use the chat and QA. Before we dive into the actual meat of the presentation, we do have a little bit of a poll here for you. We've got some interesting stats on the screen, but I am going to launch this poll and then we can kind of reflect on everything. I know some of us, our systems did not work for the poll for you guys, so I'm going to also copy the question for the poll into the chat, and I'd love you guys to also put in your answers there as well if you do not see the poll. All right. Question. It's 2026 and UAA mail is still a problem, still a big problem. It's not even a small problem. It's a big problem that everybody's facing, either with a direct mail them for themselves or if they are doing it on behalf of a customer or their organization. So what is your biggest obstacle? And we have a few options here because it could go in a lot of different directions. And there are some key options here that we have special sessions for tomorrow, I believe. Correct, Kendra? So please put in your responses. And I'm also going to put the question here in the chat. And I would love you guys to put in your answer in chat. If you do not see the poll, the answers that we had pre-filled was the client won't update the list. Move update misses too many. There's no budget or time for you to do added services or pay attention to it at that level. It's hard to prove the cost of UAA to your customer or to your organization. It's easier to just run it. You don't worry about the cost. Volume is still a big priority, and legal reasons. So this has been something that we have that has come up recently as a prime topic, and it's something that we have. It's called the address update dilemma. We have a special session for that tomorrow, so please look back for that. Mark Campbell put in chat, "Are clients too slow to update the list?" So that piggybacks off of the first option. Client won't update the list. They're too slow to update the list. Chris, do you have a few thoughts about this?
I do. So it is interesting. We're still talking about, undeliverables address mail. We're still tracking it. We have been, my goodness, for decades. Kendra, you and I way back in the day worked at Postal Soft and First Logic, and we were talking address quality back then. In fact, I remember Jack Potter, the Postmaster General Jack Potter, standing in front of MTAC, and at that time, I think UAA was measured in 10 billion pieces or some crazy amount like that. And that was his challenge. He's like, guys, we've got to cut this in half. We've got to do something about it. So we've made progress, and we'll talk about that, but it's still out there. And Brandon, I think you touched on it. Who's paying for this? We are. All of us, right? All of us are paying for it. The Postal Service isn't just eating the money, right? And address quality is not a one and done. It's a continual process. In fact, before Kendra and I are done with our presentation today, over 6,500 people will have moved. 6,500 plus an hour move in this country. So it's a constantly changing and evolving situation.
All right, so let's get into it. Take us away, Chris.
All right, so UAA, right? Undeliverable as addressed. And, on the surface, you might look at it and say, oh, it couldn't be delivered. Well, there's a lot of reasons for it. And one of the things that we need to remember is the Postal Service does not create addresses. The municipalities do, right? So the little townships, the little, cities and stuff like that, they're the ones that have to create these addresses. In fact, I've even seen new housing development areas where the builder was coming up with the street names. Right. My cousin lived at a place where every street was named after an element on the periodic table. Right. So, somebody was on Uranium Lane or some crazy thing like that. So, you've got all these different nuances and stuff. And it can be very difficult for, the software to be able to track that. But again, move update is one of the number one reasons. Right? Somebody's moved, a business, family, individual. As I said before, it's quite a bit. The addresses, they can't read it. Postal Service can't see the address. One of the things, and Kendra, you and I were chatting about this, that I brought up at MTAC last week, because we were talking about UAA again, and there's hey, we've noticed that there's a lot of addresses that look like they should have been delivered, but they're looping. It's called loop mail. It's just looping around in the Postal Service. I'm like, yeah, it's because the mailer put the old address on the front, the human readable part, but the barcode was a new updated zip code, so they don't match. So it just sits there and loops around in there, and it's kind of crazy. You think, well, why wouldn't you update that? It's like, well, legal restraint or whatever, different things for it. And Kendra, I'm sure you've seen a lot of situations with customers bringing scenarios to you, haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah, and we know, and we'll talk about this. We have a session coming up tomorrow.
Yep,
tomorrow. Brandon, you can, with the legal restraint questions, and we'll talk, a little deeper on that whole subject, and people trying to find ways around that. So we'll talk about some of those strategies with keeping the old address and updating the barcode and some of those situations. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. And the key thing here, folks, is that the Postal Service should not be your address quality solution. They're not, right? Will they do their effort to try and deliver the piece? Of course, right? The person responsible for address quality and making sure that it's complete, correct, and current is you. You, the mail service provider, you, the mail owner, right? You're responsible for that. And you have an opportunity with the technology and tools that BCC Software provides to be able to do that in the most effective manner. And that's what Kendra and I are going to talk about today, how to proactively improve your address quality. Now, UAA, as I said before, we've been tracking this for a long time. I mean, since the early 2000s. And we've rolled out different technologies along the way, which I'll talk about in a moment. But just take a look at the chart here, right? Undeliverables addressed mail is still measured in the billions of pieces of mail. Billions of pieces of mail thrown away. 2.3 billion pieces were thrown away by the Postal Service. Didn't get delivered, right? If it's marketing mail and the address is wrong, the carrier chucks it, just throws it away. That's junk mail. That's the true definition of junk mail, right? But, and in as much as that's a concern, because that's the large piece of that bar, the green, it's the return to sender and the forwarded that really we haven't made much of a dent on with some of these pieces. Most of that stuff, that's your first class mail, right? So that's enough. And there's a cost to that. I mean, there's a cost, an accumulative cost to the Postal Service, that end up getting passed along to us, again, is about $1 billion. So it's a significant amount. And yes, you look at that and you say, well, it's going down because mail volume's going down. Actually, what's interesting with it, and look at the green bar, is the treated as waste. We saw a lot during COVID and coming out of that, where people were sort of curtailing their lists and saying, you know what, I can't afford to mail junk anymore. I can't afford to mail to bad addresses. So I've talked to a lot of mail service providers who are helping their customers sort of reduce the addresses that are bad. And you know what we found is that the response rate that's measured for the efficacy of the campaign, and I'm talking direct mail now, it goes up, right? Because if you take out the addresses that are not going to get responded to, and you leave in the ones that have a likely, response rate, the value goes up, the ROI goes up. And there's so much that you can do to help make sure that those get delivered, so that you can take full advantage of it, because you're paying for the postage on those pieces, and that continues to be significant every year. Any surprises on that one, Kendra?
Yeah, I was actually surprised. I went out, you can actually find this on Postal Pro.
Yeah.
When you were talking about the numbers, the UAA mail, I was looking for at last quarter, 30% is standard mail or marketing mail. And I was surprised at how high that number was. You kind of expect it with first class mail, because again, we know there is legal restraint. But marketing mail, we really can do changes in the address. And there's a lot of stuff we can do to make sure that mail is delivered. So 30% is such a high number. That's a lot of mail that's just chucked right in the garbage. We know it's just going to go poop, gone, right? So 30% is so high, and we need to do something about it.
Yeah, and it's a missed opportunity too, right? So it's not just the wasted postage, paper, address list, for the acquisition, but you've lost an opportunity for somebody, right?
And you've talked about it before, Chris, like the, things that, it will impact, right?
Yeah.
Negative brand impact and, compliance. Well, compliance risk probably is more on your first class.
Right.
But wasted, print and postage, I mean, it really does affect.
It gets costly. Yeah, it gets costly. Now, there are tools, as I said before, during the 2000s. In fact, I remember I was the address quality elected focus area leader at MTAC when we were starting to roll out some of these different data sets and things like DPV and LaxLink and SweetLink and so forth. All of that is baked into your CASS-certified software. So you're not really seeing the nuances of these individual data sets. But what's important for you to understand is that the Postal Service provides data tables, and the software will use those tables in a very specific manner, looking up the address and building upon it. And it really is almost like a pyramid. You start with a CASS-certified or the ZIP+4. You standardize the address. Okay, you have to parse and standardize the address. Then you start to look, okay, LaxLink, is it a rural address? Maybe they put in a 911 program or something like that. Or, it was a very rural address and now they got a street style. I remember when they did that for the log house I grew up in northern Minnesota, literally. And, SweetLink, is it a business, right? And there's a suite number we can add on to it. Delivery point validation, right? Is this really deliverable and so forth? There are postal tools and industry tools now that are working in an interoperability opportunity for you to be able to ultimately improve the address until we get into the update part of it, which is NCOA link. NK link just basically tells you that somebody moved, but it was more than 18 months ago. So you got to use the full service provider data, which BCC provides. And then ACS, Address Correction Service, right, for the Postal Service. So they make those changes after the fact. Each one of these steps works together to try and improve the address. But here's the thing, folks. On that journey for a complete, correct, and current address, the software is actually talking to you. There are return codes. There are indicators. There's clues that the software is telling you as you go along this particular journey. The question really is, your software is talking to you. Are you listening? Right? Are you leveraging these codes and paying attention to it? Kendra, do you remember any of these data sets when they first came out?
Oh yeah, DPV was one when that first came out. A lot of customers didn't know what to do with it, right? They weren't getting zip 4s anymore, and they didn't know what DPV was. And it was like, explaining it to customers, and to, our MSPs, explaining it to their end users. You don't want to deliver mail to a city park, right? There's
Right.
nobody there to receive it. You can drop it off at the slide at the park, but nobody's going to pick it up. So having customers understand what a deliverable address is, where there's a mailbox, a receiving entry point, or this mailbox, then customers started to understand what DPV was,
Right.
and they could explain it to their customers.
Yeah, I do
So we
remember
have
that
those
too.
codes. Yeah.
I remember when it came out. In fact, we had a very specific MTech work group on that to try and educate the industry, really, that, hey, this is valuable data, and you can leverage this to make better address correction changes with it. So let's go through a series of slides here, because we're going to kind of walk through an example of a name and address, and these are screenshots out of Mail Manager, but really any of the software products kind of have that foundation to it. And it really starts with, even before the screen, parsing the name and address, right? Being able to go through and identify what is a street address, the prefix, the postfix, the directionals, all these different little codes that if you're ever really having a hard time sleeping at night, publication 28 is your friend, right? That is the publication from the Postal Service with all the rules and regulations around address quality. Excuse me. And it's a very interesting book to go through, but parsing the address is critical. Kendra, I think about, because I ask, a lot of people ask me, it's like, well, aren't all these software, these CASS-certified products the same? And they're really not, are they? Each one has a little bit of a different nuance to it, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And what I find most often is it's the parsing, right? Just like, we have a driver's license, right? I'm sure most of us have a driver's license, but that doesn't mean we all drive the same, right? Because, you don't know how many times the cones got knocked over when you got your test, or how well you can back up a trailer. I can't. That's why my wife always does it. So things like that, right? But the parsing is really important, and that's one of the things that differentiates really the industry tools from a lot of the postal tools, because they don't have the field experience that, like, a company like BCC Software does, with decades of feedback and working collectively with our customers. So back to the example on the screen. So the first thing we're going to do is we go through and we look at it, and you might see the address looks deliverable when in fact there are problems. And one of the first problem that we saw in that was code 32, default response. Kendra, for CASS-certified software, are we allowed to just make a guess on an address, or do we have to make sure that it's absolutely correct to the best of our ability?
Yeah, there's specific rules, and there's, what, like you were talking, Chris, there's, we have to parse the address first, and there's specific rules that we have to go through to match. And talking with development and QA for a lot of years, they like to explain how all of it works. And there's quite a lot of information in the CASS rules. So like you said, publication 28 talks a lot about standardization, but then there's the CASS rules on Postal Pro. We've had a lot of discussion recently, especially on the forum, about the difference between the two, the standardization versus the CASS rules. So it's been quite an interesting discussion in some cases. But yeah, there's a lot to it, and we do have to follow those rules, and that's how we get certified in the software on the CASS part of it.
That's a good point. And I know that there's some people that are relatively new to the industry. So what is CASS? CASS stands for Coding Accuracy Support System. It's a test. It's a test that the software vendors take. The Postal Service gives us 100,000 records. We run them through our software. We send them back the results. They score it, and they tell you whether you've passed or not passed, right? It's a pass or fail type of a situation with that. CASS has actually been around since the 80s. So when I was rocking out to Flock of Seagulls and Depeche Mode, the Postal Service was already starting to focus on address quality. And it actually began with a letter, right, Kendra? We had like CAS cycle A, and then we had B and C, and they were almost like every year, right?
Yeah, it used to be every year up until I think 2013 or 14.
Yeah. Yep. And then we kind of slowed down, and we had CAS cycle M and then N. And we thought N was going to stand for not again, and then we ended up having oh crap, another CAS cycle, right? So we'll have to see what comes out next. But in as much as we've made a lot of progress with it, there's still opportunity to grow. So back to our example here. When you run the software, the very first thing that it's going to do is sort of score where it thinks that address is. A 31 is the code you really want. That means you got one and only one proper response. Anything that's in yellow is an opportunity to dig a little bit deeper. And anything in red really should just be removed. It's just a bad address. Or it needs some human readable intervention. Somebody's got to really look at that and make the adjustments on it. Most often, Kendra, it's the problem is because it was imported into the software wrong or something, right? It came in the wrong way. Or
Yeah, I mean, that's very possible. I mean, some of it does depend on which program, are you using discrete fields or non-discrete fields? So there could be a number of things happening there, but if it's, just a normal kind of situation, I would say like using discrete fields and that kind of thing. You're right, Chris.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. All right. So now that's our foundation. So in the example that we had, there was a problem. It was a default zip +4, meaning that it was a high-rise apartment. Okay. But the apartment number was missing on that. Now you might look at that and say, well, yeah, but I got a zip +4, so I still get the postage discount, right? So, what do I care, right? I got you a discount. Well, you didn't get the delivered address, right? And the analogy I often use is, hey, putting the mail piece in the actual mailbox is a far better experience for the end customer than having to sift through a table in the lobby amongst other things and try and figure out where your mail is. That's a bad experience, right? So going one step further and trying to understand what's wrong. And in this case, again, the software is going to tell you. So CAS said, hey, there's multiple possibilities for this address. It's a high rise, but there's multiple possibilities. DPV now gives me another clue and says, you know what? The input address primary number does match, but the address is missing the secondary number. It wasn't in there. You need to figure out what apartment that person is living in. And that's where we need to turn to additional data technology. Next slide. And Kendra, this is a really cool tool. I don't know how many people that use Mail Manager or whatever take a look at this, but we have the ability to query or kind of take a look at what the range of possibilities are, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So what is this? Yep. So looking at this, what is this kind of telling you as to what's the story with this address?
Right. So within the range of the primary address, you can see the ranges of available apartment numbers. So it doesn't necessarily give you the exact, but it's going to tell you kind of what you're missing.
Okay. And here, as I take a look on the right, you can almost see we do have an apartment. It looks like it's got 2 floors on it. The first floor has apartments 1 through 5, and the second floor has apartments 6 through 12. But take a look to the left on your screen here, folks, where we've got the larger rectangle. The zip +4 is different depending on whether you're on the first floor or the second floor of this high rise. See, that's why the secondary address is now a primary concern for us as we're doing our address quality, because we want to make sure that we're getting it delivered to the right person. And you may say, marketing mail, it's okay. They'll just pick it up on the table. But I think a lot of those addresses that are in that database are used for shipping and fulfilling products and things like that. That's not going to be a good experience. So you want to fix that as soon as you can so your customer gets that updated information. Next slide. And that's exactly what I just said. The secondary address is now the primary problem with it. And as we look at what the potential, it could be that they're in apartment 4B, right? Now, to do that, we need to use non-postal data. And that's where we get into an address resolution service. And I think we've got a slide here coming up that talks a little bit more about that. There it is. So The Postal Service has SweetLink, and I mentioned that before. SweetLink is for businesses to give the suite number, and only if the business kind of shares that information with the Postal Service. What the Postal Service does not have, and in fact, Congress said, nope, you can't have that, is apartment link. We had designed it. We had talked about doing that back in the early 2000s, but the legal department of the Postal Service said, no, it's too sensitive of data. So how can we resolve apartments? Well, BCC has industry sourced data that we leverage, and we look at the individual's name and try to ascertain through other sources that, yep, that's the right address for that person. So it really is an apartment append. So in this situation, we can look into that data, find the individual, see that it's apartment 4B, and then add that to the address. And now we've got the complete zip plus 4, the proper one. And even though the other one may have had the wrong zip plus 4, we might have gotten a discount. It's really the delivered address that we're hunting after, not the discounts. More about the delivery, less about the discounts. Kendra, do you see a lot of people using ARS?
We have some. There are some, but
questions come in about it?
I mean, there's definitely customers that call about the secondary address. I think it would definitely be a benefit to more customers. And even in the chat where our clients are too slow to update the list. Well, there you go.
Yeah. I mean, you know, and we've seen some incredible resolution rates on that. And here's why it's really important for that secondary address, folks. Once we get to the move update phase, we're going to talk about that in a minute here. I need to have the address that was filed with the Postal Service when they moved. And it has to be correct. It's got to have the zip plus 4 that matches. It's got to have the secondary address on it, because otherwise I can't match. If I don't have a 9-digit zip code, right, the zip plus 4, if I don't have that, it can't do a lookup in NCOA link. I have no way of knowing where that person moved. If I don't have the secondary information and there was an apartment they were moving from, I'm not going to be able to make a match. So you really, really do need to make that, you know, that modest investment of time and maybe a little additional, fees that the customer should certainly pay for, that you can help you get the address updated and find where this person moved. Which brings me to the national change of address. So right now today, we have something called NCOA link, and it's actually been around for over 20 years. NCOA link is the national change of address database that the Postal Service maintains. And as I said before, it's changing all the time, 6,500 an hour. And in fact, BCC is a full service licensee. We get a complete set of updated information every week. Okay. And since, you know, we'll talk a little bit more about it, the Postal Service is building additional ways for us to improve NCOA link, and NCOA Plus is one of those we'll talk about in a minute. But there's two different flavors. There's an 18-month look back and a 48-month look back. BCC is a 48-month. There's only about 20 licensees that have that, but it's a big investment. It's something that we believe in. In fact, the Postal Service has raised the price on that 78% over the last 5 years. Ouch. But it's an important tool, and you know, BCC is committed to address quality and what I call the 3C approach: complete, correct, and current addresses for timely, predictable, and ultimate delivery of the mail. Kendra, here's where things get a little bit different, right? An address and then a name and address. There's kind of a pretty big important difference here. Wouldn't you agree?
Right. So for NCOA?
Yeah, for NCOA, I mean, think about what are some of the things, for example, in a name. It's not just the address. There are other aspects with it, right? Because now we're bringing the name in. So this is a little bit of a privacy issue, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so like if you're doing like a family or individual match, for NCOA.
Yes. So that's kind of the point, is that for NCOA, because now we're dealing not just with an address, we're dealing with a name associated with the address. And then that's where it starts to move into the Privacy Act of 1974 and some of these other things that are of concern to the government and to the Postal Service. So matching for NCOA link is really dependent on some things that we may not think about. Gender, for example, right? If I file a change of address and I just say Chris Lean on it, Chris is a gender neutral name, right? You can have Christine, you could have Christopher, things like, I'm a Christopher, right? But you can have things like that, and just knowing if that person filed that, their middle name or middle initial could be part of it. The surname, that's another one that can sometimes trip you up. We had back in the day, we had a vice president of marketing, Sean Ryan, who ran marketing. Some of you may remember him. It's a great example. Sean and Ryan are two first names, right? Typically. So which one is the surname, right?
Yeah, if you have like a junior,
Mhm. Yeah, that's right. You've seen some of those problems before too, haven't you, Kendra?
Yeah. If you have a Brandon Calloway Jr., for example,
Yeah.
living in the house.
Talk a little bit about share a little bit about the family versus individual, and how that's important, and what have you seen or heard on that that's a challenge?
So like if you have the family move, like it goes on the like if the whole family moves versus just if you have, let's say, a kid that goes to college.
Right.
Yeah. So it can be challenging depending on how you bring the name into the software. If it's a full name or last name, how we parse the name out, how things are brought in. That can cause issues or change how the NCOA match is made. So
Yep.
I want to pause for a second. There's a couple questions regarding some stuff that we just recently talked about. One big one, the additional charges for ARS service. Kendra, what does that look like for customers? I know we also have ACS as well that's baked into some of our software. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
yes. So as far as like the availability of it or the pricing?
Both.
Both. Yeah. So the pricing, you can find pricing like on the DS store if you go to the portal. There is information on the DS store, and there's also a product availability link on the DS store, so you can see like what products, whether it's ACS or ARS, what products are compatible with some of these services. And of course, your salesperson can help you with some of those products. And then there's more, if you go to the data services page, you can find out more information about those, and it will tell you like more information about the service itself. So we can get you more information about the pricing. I don't know all the pricing right offhand. Sorry.
Yeah.
But it's based on a credit basis, correct? So within our customer service portal, you can browse the store within our portal, and it will give you self-serve data service credits that you can purchase in volumes to suit whatever your list volume size is that you're looking to apply there. Chris?
And what I often see for those customers, mail service providers that are working with their customer, so they'll run the list through our software, and then that will tell them what percentage of the records are missing an apartment number, or there's something wrong with it that ARS could fix, right? And they'll present that to their customer and say, hey, if you would like, I can fix these addresses for you so that it increases the delivery and make sure it's not delayed for mail delivery, and you'll have a better chance of getting a response rate off of that if it's a direct marketing piece. And this is what the price would be, right? So it's a way for you to be able to do that for your customer. In fact, there's a company that we work with that's using BCC software technology called PreSmart, and they've got a really cool tool that gives you shows you what's going on. I think of it like an MRI for your mailing list, right? It just does that that detail, and then you can decide, right? Do you want me to heal the patient? Do you want me to go in and use these tools to fix that? So ARS is a service that BCC provides. ACS, Address Change Service, is the postal service. We support ACS as part of the tracking. It's a code that's in the Intelligent Mail barcode that signals the postal service. Yes, we want you to try and affect that. But just to differentiate, because I know they all sound alike, these acronyms together. But ARS is Address Resolution Service with BCC. ACS is Address Change Service with the postal. It's what I would call a post mailing move update method. And I don't see the screen.
Yes, I unshared just because we were having a lot of conversation. So the question was from Megan Steinberger. So I hope that answers your question. If you join us on Friday for the customer service portal side of things, Chris, you back? You froze a little bit there for a second.
I'm back. Sorry, I don't know
Okay.
what happened.
Megan Steinberger, if you join us on Friday for the portal session, part of that portal session goes through the store part of the portal, so you can kind of see what's available there and what that experience looks like. There was a quick question from Lisa Nolan. What does error in printing mean when your NCOA runs? That I thought we could address before we move on from NCOA too much.
Error in printing for NCOA runs. I'm not entirely sure what that
I
indicates.
think it might have
that
been
be?
it might have been on the slide. Let me just double check. I think it was one of the numerical errors that comes back. Error in printing, number 23.
Oh, error in
error in
primary.
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 Lisa, that said error in primary.
Yeah, not printing primary. That means the primary number is wrong. It's,
Yeah.
there is no, 213 Main Street, right? Main Street runs, 215 to whatever, right? So that means the primary number is bad. But there's an error in the primary somewhere.
And I just wanted to clarify, when we were talking about ARS and ACS, the ACS data comes back and is available through our track and trace product now. So
correct.
that is where that data value comes into play. When you incorporate mail tracking into your campaigns, you get that added layer of data back from the United States Postal Service so that you can actually take action, or your customer can take action to clean and revise their data sets, which is one of our biggest challenges. Is you can lead everyone to water, whether or not they actually take the action to clean their data, that's a whole other level. So that is one of our biggest challenges and one of our customers' biggest challenges. Chris.
Yes, I agree. In fact, we're going to talk about the codes for ACS, I believe, a little forward. So let's skip back to where we were. All right, so now we go into NCOA link. And NCOA link, like I said, because of the sensitivity of the data, you're more likely to get no match than you are to get a match. But the no matches are important because if you look at these codes again, it's going to come back and take a look at how there are certain things that they can't match on. There's more than one change of address record, and the genders are different, right? The input record matched a change of address record from a high-rise address, and so forth. So different things. Kendra, in your opinion, which one do you think is most typical that you've seen or customers have run into?
Probably, I mean, we have seen a lot where like there's no, like there's a change of address, but no new address found.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of those. And actually, it's kind of typical. I hate to say this or date anybody or call out the younger generation, but there's a lot in the younger generation that don't fill out move updates.
No, they don't.
And I just recently had somebody move out of my house, a younger person, and I had to remind them several times to do the change of address and to get their new address in the postal system. They just, I don't know.
Lazy.
They don't think about it.
Lazy.
I didn't want to say that word. I didn't want to say.
Well, no, you're right. In fact, the Office of the Inspector General, the OIG, did a report on male and millennials. It's a bit dated now. I think it's about 10 years old, but it's exactly what you're saying. There's just a mindset of not doing that. Even though it's available online, you can do it very easily, right? But there's still that mindset. And there is a solution for that. We'll talk about in a minute. Now, here's what's interesting, though, folks. When you do get a match on NCOA link, you may get like an A, and like just like back in grade school, that's a good grade. We wanted an A. I rarely saw those. So that means you had a match. Yep, we found it. A 91 or a 92 mean we did get a match, but we had to do something with the secondary address to be able to get the match. So again, remember that secondary address is a primary issue right now for our UAA. And these last three ones, that's why there's a big warning, right? If you see any of these, get them out of the list. Get them out of the list because you are just wasting money. Foreign move. If somebody moves out of the country, the Postal Service doesn't have any way to be able to get you that new address. Out of the list. They can't forward it. They can't do anything with it. found a change of address, but the person moved and left no address. Kendra, that sounds like, right? That person you were just talking about, it's like, oh, I just moved. I didn't tell anybody. Well, that's a problem, right? How are you going to find them? Or similar, the PO box was closed and they decided not to forward with that. So you definitely want to remove these addresses because you're not going to you're most likely not going to get a match, or you're going to have to use some additional, surgical tools, so to speak, to really try and see if you can find that individual. But the other last caution on this, I had a customer that was doing ancillary service endorsements, right, which is another way you can get, service from the Postal Service on delivering your mail piece. And they did address service requested, which is where the Postal Service charges you after the fact. And it was on marketing mail, and they had a bunch of these danger codes in there, and it cost them 5 figures in a bill that they weren't anticipating. It blew out their entire mailing, but it happened to be a school. Blew out their entire mailing, but for one mistake like that. So super, super careful if you run into any of these codes. And we talked about ACS a moment ago. And this is really cool, Kendra. This, I think these are codes that the carrier will identify based on that. And there's quite a bit of information here, isn't there?
Right, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
these are the code, this is the data that we were talking about comes back from the post office within the mail tracking process.
Yep. And it's all done electronically now too. So you can take that file and run it against, in Mail Manager, and then update the list based on this stuff. And take a look at some of these codes, right? Like code P, deceased, right?
Yeah.
It's good to know, right? You shouldn't be mailing to that person, right? They're deceased. The carrier's letting you know, sorry, right? They moved on. They had a permanent change of address. But you can do deceased suppression, by the way, before you even mail. That's another thing from an address quality aspect. I know we're here kind of fixing addresses, but deceased suppression is certainly something you should do, because they're not going to get a response rate if you mail to a deceased person. And if it did, I'd love to see the mail piece because it woke the dead.
And a little bit of a double plug. We have
Right.
a session on Friday we have 2 sessions on Friday, one for mail tracking and ACS stuff, and the other one is for data marketing services, which we talked about the credits through the portal. Everything we're talking about in virtual is all interconnected here. So the DMS presentation also on Friday gets into some deceased suppression and some other additional suppression services to clean your data. So
Well, thanks, Brandon. The other one here, or the last one there, Kent, that you probably have seen, M, no mail receptacle, right? Living in rural Minnesota, like you and I both do, right? That's when that snowplow hits the mailbox, right? And then, so, which has happened. All right, next. All right, so using NCOA link, right? Find a match for Jane Doe. Yep, we can find her, but it's in this example. What if you get like one of those danger codes I mentioned, code 02, move left no address. Jane Doe decided not to fill out a change of address. She might be, maybe a Gen Z or or something like that, right? That decided, I don't know what we're doing. So, does that mean we just lost that person? Not necessarily. There is one other industry tool that we can try and use, and that's proprietary change of address. And PCOA is pretty interesting. Kendra, can you remember how long have we been offering PCOA?
Well, longer than I've been with BCC, and
Well,
even back in the
it was there when I was here a decade ago.
Yeah, so 10 years, about 10 years, right, Brandon? Something like that.
Yeah. I think under some of the products, isn't it called ECOA? So PCOA, ECOA.
Yeah.
Enhanced change of address.
So this is what you were saying before, Kendra. Somebody that doesn't fill out their change of address, but you know what? They did tell somebody, right? They told Best Buy when they bought the TV for the new apartment that they moved into and filled out the warranty registration card. Or they did tell, Sports Illustrated when they renewed the swimsuit edition, or whatever it is, that they're, I'm now really dating myself. But maybe they still had that. I don't know. My point is that people do notify companies, right? And then there are entities that go and collect that data, and we can leverage that to be able to see if we can find a match by looking at names and addresses and see if we can find someone with that. And sometimes that can actually help to fix what's called chained addresses. Brandon, next slide. I think that's where we go. Yeah. Sometimes PCOA can fill in that missing link. Kendra, chained addresses. That's what, you've seen that before, right? Where they move from one to, and so forth.
Right.
That making
The
sense?
chain. Sorry, my
Yep.
computer's kind of freezing up there. So the chained addresses where they move multiple times.
Yep.
Yep.
And we find that I think it was like some studies said that people typically move 5 to 7 times in their life or whatever like that. They're constantly moving, and particularly a student or whatever, or somebody who moves out of the house and then gets an apartment and kind of keep bounces around. And if they forget to file a change of address along that journey, it breaks the chain. So chain address means that if I put in, this 1583 Elm Street in Rochester, New York, for example, because that was the address that I had in my database, if they had been filing a change of address for each one of those moves, NCOA link would automatically chain those and then give me the current address based on what it has. But if the chain is broken in the middle, we wouldn't be able to make that connection anymore. So PCOA can actually help to sort of fill in the blanks there sometimes. And what's really cool about something that the Postal Service is hoping to have launched on October 4th that we've been testing is something called NCOA Plus. And NCOA Plus could be one of the surgical tools that we can leverage to fix some of these chained addresses. So we started off with, a questionable address, and by using these tools, we were able to find the right one. But I do want, since I talked about it a little bit, the Postal Service is bringing out all new data. In fact, next week when we're in Nashville for the live event for information exchange, Earl Johnson Jr. with the U.S. Postal Service, who's in charge of all these addressing databases for the Postal Service, and he's a great guy. Earl's going to be with us in Nashville. He's going to talk about each one of these and do a deep dive into that and sort of the rationale by why the Postal Service is bringing these to the industry now. But I'm going to start first with that NCOA Plus product. And you may have seen that in some of the headlines for the industry. Let me dispel something right up front. NCOA Plus does not replace NCOA Link. Be clear on that. NCOA Plus does not replace NCOA Link. That's not what it's for. Maybe originally Preetha Mehra, the Chief Information Officer, thought it might, but we educated her and she realizes, no, that's not how it's going to work. NCOA Plus is a great addition to NCOA Link, and that's why, surgical experts like BCC Software who have these tools and are able to leverage them appropriately in the use of the software, I'm excited about that. That's going to give us the ability to do transactional lookups, one address at a time. It's going to give us the ability to look at an address without having to have a path filled out completely. It's going to have data that's updated daily from the Postal Service. It's going to leverage the Postal Service's address lookup engine. So we'll kind of like a super code the addresses as we're working together with that. And we'll be able to, with the Postal Service, share how to improve address quality with them so that it creates a wonderful opportunity for us to do things that I've been dreaming about for 20 years. But it's, again, I want to be clear. This is not to replace the NCOA link. You still need to use NCOA link with a licensee, but we will be leveraging this as we go forward. And then we got some other cool data sets. Geocoding, right? Kendra, you've helped customers leverage that, right?
Geocode is pretty cool, especially if you want to target specific areas. There's both the rooftop and there's 2 different kinds, and we do offer both. So, and that's, I believe, with majority of products. So that's a fun one.
It is, and you know what's cool about this is, so you're right, we've got 2 different levels. This geocode, though, is the latitude, longitude of 2 things: the door of the house and the mailbox. So think about a cluster box, right? A new housing development, and there's a cluster box for mail. The geocode for that is different than the house, right? Because it's in a different location. And why would I need to have the latitude, longitude of the actual mail receptacle? Because that's where the mail moment happens, right? And so if I know that that individual is in a geofence, right, within 10 feet or something like that of that mail moment, opportunity, think about what I could do with promotions and digital messaging that communicates, a phygital experience at the mail moment, right? That would be amazing. And that's the kind of transformative opportunities that direct marketers are looking for. And we can do that now. I mean, I'm really, really excited about, as you could tell, excited about those two, NCOA Plus and in the geocoding. And then I like some of the mobility trends and the occupancy trends too. So this is the Postal Service doing data mining of all of this information they have and starting to provide interesting data sets that go beyond the mail, right? And allow marketers or maybe a mail service provider who's working with real estate companies, for example, hey, what's an area that would be good for marketing with that, or emerging growth areas in the country where you might want to target for whatever retail, different things with it. So again, my mind is just reeling with a lot of these different ideas, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. Right? There's a whole bunch of other data sets that Earl's going to talk about next week that are on the horizon that hopefully we'll be able to leverage. But I agree with you, Kendra. The geocoding, that's powerful for radial selecting.
Yeah, it's exciting. And when I think about some of these lists that do have some poor quality, like in the past where we've talked to customers and we've had on the pre-sorting side, addresses, they just want to mail everything. I've seen where they have zip codes of all zeros, right?
Right.
And it's like, why don't you pull those addresses out? And some people are like, well, the customer wants to mail everything. If you pulled out those pieces that are not getting those automation rates and you can offer them a service and up that experience, like you say, Chris, and you're that trusted partner, that trusted MSP, and you're adding that value, like you say, creating that mail moment. I love that. You got to coin that. That is totally a you.
He's used it a few times.
But you're creating that better experience for them and their mail, and getting that response rate and just creating that better all around mail piece and response rate, trusted partner, all of that for that customer. They're going to come back to you. And you're going to be the business that they come to. I think about mail pieces I get when you were talking about the suppression and the deceased.
Yeah.
I get mail for family members, not that we want to talk about deceased people, but that have been gone for some time. And I'm like, why do I keep getting this mail? It doesn't even apply to me.
No, I know. And you talk about, I mean, it's insensitive, right? It can be painful. I've talked to people, with that. That's a hard one for me to really understand because the tools and technology are there to take that out. The only thing I can kind of come across, and I've heard this directly from a lot of mail service providers, like, look, Chris, I get paid on the piece. Okay. I get paid for the number of pieces that go in the mailing. So whether or not it gets delivered, right, that's not a big concern. Well, you should be concerned, right? Because we can measure campaigns now. We can track mail pieces. This is not a spray and pray moment anymore. Those are gone, right? We don't just put mail in the system and hope it arrives. We actually see where it's at. And so does your customer. And your customer is going to know that these pieces were ineffective. So you have an opportunity, right, with the tools and technology to be able to help improve mail deliverability. And with these new data sets, think about what you can do to help add value to the mail piece, right? And think about the personalization. I'll give you another, for example, and I touch on this geocoding, right? If you're sending out a postcard letting somebody know that there's a new Dunkin' Donuts in the neighborhood, how cool would it be, right, to actually have a map on the postcard of how to get to that new Dunkin' Donuts, right? Or you're doing, you got an election coming up and you want people to know where their polling place is. You can have that on there. The geocoding allows you to personalize the piece far more than what we've had before. And so it's really cool on some of this technology. And I applaud our postal partners for bringing this to the market. The key and the opportunity for us, BCC and our customers, is to put our collective minds together and think about how can we leverage this, right, to add value to the mail, to grow our business, to get other people to come back in. And when you overlay this with that incredible BCC impact tool that Kate Sanders talked about yesterday, right, and the postal promotions, for example, the direct mail discovery that's coming out next year, right? Where 40% discount off of postage and 5% goes to the MSP for helping to bring somebody back into the industry that stopped mailing 2 years ago or maybe hasn't mailed. You start adding these data sets and talking about how it's different now and what you can do. That's a huge opportunity for a lot of the small and medium-sized printers, right? So I'm excited, as you can tell. A lot of stuff.
I'm really glad you both brought up the you each had a unique kind of angle to the subject, which is the why. Why should anybody here care? Why should anybody that's on this session right now care to either one, be vigilant about their customers correcting their data, or two, care because they're not reflecting or absorbing the positive gains that could potentially come from adding this service set to your services. So the big conversation that we're having commonly across whether it's an organization or MSPs, PSPs, all of our customers, is about shifting the mindset of how you are offering your service set to your customers or to the organization in which you serve, in order to have a different dialogue with your direct customers or your Marcom team, or people who are used to pushing out as much mail volume as possible, and having a mindset where their revenue model was structured around volume, or their ROI was based around volume as a baseline metric. And so what we're doing is we're having the same conversations with all different kinds of customers, where we're saying, instead of having a focus on that cost per piece, therefore yielding a higher return to your business in sales, because you're mailing out 100,000 pieces when 25% of them are undeliverable or more. Have the conversation where you're reducing the amount of volume, but you're upcharging the service costs you do per piece, because you're adding additional value and you're recouping the service cost direct from your customer, because you're bringing that added value. And that's that mindset shift that we're really in a transitory state with all of our customers. Products like Chris noted, BCC Impact. A lot of you were on the session yesterday where Kate was talking about that. Products like BCC Impact are literally built in order to try and help you have those dialogues. It's available right now for free. You can go to bccimpact.com and start playing around with those metrics to see how you could shift your sales conversations with your customers and add addition to cover the cost, and then some of additional things like the rooftop geocoding or the PCOA list suppression, or even adding ACS and mail tracking to your campaigns. Chris, Kendra, do you have any thoughts about everything I just said?
Yeah, I mean, you're just making the piece more valuable, right? I mean, when you're actually delivering it and making it meaningful, and sometimes, delivering it to the right person, right? So we want to have value for our customers. We want to set that bar higher. We don't just want to fill the garbage cans with 30% of marketing mail. So I think we can do better.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, and there's a direct correlation between getting a complete, correct, and current address and an increased response rate. So having that conversation with your customer and letting them know that, you have the tools to be able to fix the patient, right? We can heal the patient with that part. I took a peek at the chat here, and I like the comment from Tom Adams on this. It's too bad state governments couldn't report death certificate info to the USPS to clean up some of those. Totally agree with you on that. That was something that we had talked about doing, actually, back in the day, just adding deceased as an indicator into the NCOA link data, because like I say, it's a type of move. It's like a permanent move, right? But there was concern at the time about agencies working together like that. I think that's changed. And that's one of the things I will say that I think PMG Steiner was smart to call up at his both his House and his Senate committee hearings earlier this summer, is that the Postal Service can help a lot of these agencies if you guys would work together. So
Well, I appreciate everyone's time so much. Before we wrap up, I know we talked about a few different sessions that are coming up tomorrow and Friday. I'm gonna pull a screen up about that. I just want to give a shout out to two of our gold sponsors for Information Exchange 2026. They've been absolutely valuable in having in making Information Exchange a reality. They also are bringing a ton of insight. If you are still with us for the rest of the day, in about a half hour, Direct Logistics will be presenting. So definitely tune in for that one. And Solomar was yesterday. They did an absolutely incredible presentation. We'll be sharing that with everybody, the recording with everybody once we have it processed. So thank you so much. This is a full recap of what you can expect with us over the next couple of days. We have a bulk mailer deep dive demo later today. And then we're getting into some of those conversations we just talked about today in greater detail. The address update dilemma, the legal aspect of it that many people pointed at in that poll in the very beginning. We're talking about mail tracking and data marketing services, as well as the portal, all on Fridays. We've got a big series there. There was a question for Mail Manager. The address tool is F7. Oh, nice.
Just wanted to throw that in there. If you need
Oh,
help
that's you,
finding it,
Kendra.
just let us know.
That's
Yeah,
you,
that was
Kendra.
me. Somebody had asked that.
Special
before.
shout out. Thank you so much, Franklin, for adding the additional insight into chat and the Q&A. We really appreciate that. Let me just check the Q&A and see if there's any others that we
Frank's
missed.
a great data detective. He's amazing.
Mike Fogelman asked earlier, I apologize, Mike, I meant to get to yours. Mail Manager Full Service just added our CAS code and description fields. I understand fields already exist in Bulk Mailer and Architect. How are users leveraging these codes along with CAS return and DPV confirmation codes into their workflow?
Kendra?
Yeah, so we have some great knowledge base articles. If you haven't seen them, I will post into the chat a great knowledge base article. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, we're never going to tell you in the support world like what addresses to remove from your list, because everybody has kind of their different nuances of what addresses to keep and not keep in their list or pre-sort. But you should go through and analyze, based on your business rules, what addresses to keep in your list. But we do give guidance and suggestions with that knowledge base article based on what return codes you get, depending on what processes, CAS, NCOA, and that kind of thing. So in that knowledge base article, it does give a really good spreadsheet kind of what our suggestions would be based on your return codes. So that's super helpful. You can print it out, bookmark it, whatever you want to do there. And then our knowledge base has a lot of great information, and just generally speaking. But again, we'll go through that too on Friday.
Yeah, you're going to see two more of Kendra coming up this week. So she'll be. I want to give a special thank you to Chris and Kendra. Thank you so much for joining us. I know your time is very valuable. You're very busy people, and I appreciate you coming on here and bringing all of this master postal insight, industry insight, customer support insight. Kendra, you've dealt with so many different customer scenarios. You're a wealth of your gold mine of knowledge. So I appreciate you guys very much. I know everybody who's joined us does. And you can always reach BCC. So just if you have any questions or follow-up questions about the information you heard today, you'll see us again in a little bit and the rest of this week. Otherwise, you can reach us anytime. Just go to our website and we'll take care of you. Thank you so much, everybody. Chris, Kendra, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon.